Recording, there it
Live.
is. Yeah.
There you
Hey,
go.
well, welcome, and thanks to Carol and the alumni office for inviting me to be here. Um, this is Drew in the time of COVID. So for particularly thanks to the alumni, family, friends, who are joining us, and for the students who are here as our panelists. Um, we all lived through March of 2020. Imagine you were a college student, first year, second year, third year, in March of 2020 hit. How different would it have been? So we're really interested to hear from you, the guests. We have a panel of students which will introduce themselves in just a second. Be thinking about what kinds of questions you might want to know about. What was it like being a college student during this time? Obviously, I was here, and we all lived through the surreal weirdness of it, but it's a particularly interesting thing about being in college. A little bit of housekeeping. So again, we want questions from you all. I think the best thing is probably just to put them in the chat. And we'll have Joe or Carol or someone could be monitoring, and me too, the chat, and we'll try to just get to as many questions as we can. And why don't we next, without further ado, hear from who our panelists are, who the students are who are here. So two things, or maybe three or four things, students, if you would quickly, your name, your year, and any role you might play on campus if that's relevant to your experience. And then maybe two quick things to note that might spur some questions from our guests. One, did you come back to live on campus at all? So we were all, most of us anyway, online for the remaining of the spring of 2020, even the fall of 2020. And then for the spring of 2021 that just ended, there was some students who came back. And so if that was you, that might spur different questions from our guests. And then other thing, maybe just to quickly note, if there's anything in your academic life that would further complicate what COVID would have done to it. So whether it be study abroad plans or internships or New York semester, athletics. So if you have anything like that going on in your life, panel, tell us that. So your name, your year, and maybe just a thing or two that might be relevant for your experience while you're here. So why don't you take it away? I don't know, Brie, that first one on my list.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Brie. I am a junior at Drew University, class of 2022. I guess senior now, which is crazy to say. Time flew by. But I am a media and communications and English major with a minor in film and applied leadership. And I've been on campus through it all. I never left for any of COVID. So when everything went crazy, I still stayed here and through the summer and through everyone coming back. And I also was doing the New York semester on social entrepreneurship when COVID hit. So that got switched online. So I can talk and answer any of those questions that we might have about that as well. And I've also done 3 virtual internships, and I'm doing a virtual internship right now. So I can talk about that kind of process as well. And I work in the Office of Alumni and Parent Communities with Carol and Joe, and I worked with them remotely as well. And I worked in the IT department, and I gave tours, and I also run the Volunteer Without Borders Club on campus, which is a club that does a lot of international and domestic traveling, which was put on hold this year, but we still pushed through and did some service work. So I'm a part of that, and I'm also a part of the dance team at school and some other things. And I also worked in the town of Madison, so I can talk to you about how Madison might have changed a little bit too during the time of COVID.
Man, amazing. Thank you. Okay. Who's next? Gabby? You're next on my list.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gabby. I am a rising junior, class of 2023 CLA student at Drew. Some of the things that I'm involved in, I served as the president of both the BIPOC peer mentoring program as well as of Drew First, which is for first generation college students. Those are 2 organizations that I essentially established this past year during the pandemic. On top of that, I served as the treasurer of Ariel, which is the organization for Latino students. I'm now going to be the rising vice president. And I recently finished up my first year with student government, serving as a senator at large. Those are essentially my main roles. I am also a Baldwin Honors and Civic Scholars student. Because I'm a first gen college student, I do a fellowship on the weekends with America Needs You, which is specific to first gen college students. And I'll be doing that again this year, which will continue to be remote. And I left mid semester through the spring first year because of what happened. And I stayed remote through the entirety of my sophomore year. I did my 2 internships remotely, and I'm going to do my 3rd one this summer in a hybrid model. So a lot's been going on, but definitely think that there's a lot to talk about with all those experiences.
Great, thank you. Karina.
Hi, everyone. My name is Karina Salvi. My pronouns are she, her, hers. So I'll just make sure that hopefully I hit everything that Professor Dolan mentioned. So I'm a current CLA student, undergraduate student, class of 2023. I am majoring in political science, minoring in Spanish, dance, and law, justice and society. I currently serve as the CLA student government president. For those that may not know, student government is an organization on campus that has been around for years. It's like one of the oldest organizations on campus. It right now, the goals of it is basically focusing on bridging gaps between administration and students, but also working with administration to make a better Drew community and focus on student concerns and amplifying that, as well as administration concerns with students. I also currently serve as a member of the Race and Racial Justice Committee that handles racial initiatives on campus, considering the collective letter, which I can definitely get into later if anyone has questions. I also work in the Career Center Department as the undergraduate assistant for internship management. So if you have any questions in the career department, especially since we've already transitioned to COVID, it's definitely difficult finding internships or adapting to that. Trying to make sure. I did leave, I think, around the same time as Gabby and everyone else for spring semester when they said that we did have to go home. I did go home. I couldn't stay on campus, and I've been at home since, but I have been traveling back and forth between Drew, obviously for work and such. But I'm excited to be here, and if anyone has questions, I am free to answer them.
Thank you very much. Nick, let's hear from Nick.
Man, it's hard to follow up all these impressive resumes, huh? So obviously my name is Nick. I played soccer at Drew. I did my undergrad at Drew. I got my major in business and I minored in Spanish. I just am in the process of finishing up my master's in finance. Yeah, I mean, I did the Wall Street semester and social entrepreneurship semester while I was at Drew. I lived my 4 years on campus. This past year I did remote. Professor Firestone's here. I mean, he made it easier than it should have been. So, I mean, definitely without our professors, I mean, I don't know what I would have done, but yeah, I mean, any questions I could have between like life at Drew, sports at Drew, sports and combining that with classwork and everything. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm leaving out.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's great.
Any questions I could answer, I'm happy to.
Thank you. And Tom, I think you're the last student. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe I'm the last one. So my name is Tom. I was a senior this past year at Drew, so I just recently graduated. I graduated with a major in psychology and minors in philosophy and law, justice, and society. I was on the baseball team at Drew, and I was the captain of the team this past year. When COVID all hit, I left campus as pretty much everyone else, and I chose to remain off campus. However, I did live in Chatham this past year, so I was rather close to campus. I wasn't super affected by COVID this past year in terms of internships or anything like that. But looking for jobs has been particularly interesting during this time. So a lot of online interviews, which is different, but that's about it for me.
Great. Well, thank you. And again, I really appreciate you all being here and spending the time. So, so for the guests, please be thinking about what questions you might have for any of our panelists. You can put them in the chat. I guess I can start off with a question. I'll maybe open up, we can just sort of go around quickly what you all might think about. So what was life like? And I think Bob and a few others are chiming in. So maybe you can give one of you, what was life like on campus in March of 2020? What was one thing that stood out? And then we can maybe see what some of the chat questions are. Tom, someone's chiming in.
I can speak a little bit about it.
Excellent, Brie.
So I remember I actually was doing the New York semester at the time. We just came back from the Social Entrepreneurship Day in New York City, and we came back just as the email hit all of campus. And I remember walking back to my room and people leaving with suitcases and just being like, what is going on? And I feel like this is a common reaction that a lot of people had. And then being on campus over the summer, I saw Drew like I've never seen Drew before, where there's no one there. And so it's definitely a different way of seeing campus. But then it was really, really great to be able to see how the town of Madison handled it, how you can work with different people in the community still virtually, and all the opportunities that we had just really made me feel like I was still getting the most out of college that we could at the time. And then switching into this spring semester, even a little bit of fall semester, people started coming back, and it's just been so great to see campus slowly becoming Drew again.
Slowly becoming Drew again. Bob Duffy, I think you have a question in the chat. Now, is this about particularly activities during COVID, or you just want to know in general what's going on at campus?
Just in general.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can see that in the chat, Bob asked, you know, what sort of social events have been going on, and I know there have been some during COVID, although it's been challenging. Can anyone any attempts to do things socially during COVID, or what things have been happening? I know we said Bree, you were on campus. What have you guys been doing for fun and social events, so except you can?
I can speak for the remote portion of what was happening. So when everything started, if I remember correctly, all of the clubs lost the budgets, I think, and the same thing rolled over into the fall. So we all had to transition to a period where we needed to figure out how to continue developing community through the laptops, which was a very hard situation, especially being a first year student at the time when that happened, because I was still trying to figure out who my crowd was and where I wanted to be socially at Drew, and to kind of have that cutoff so out of the blue was a lot to take in. My sophomore year, I became a lot more engaged with club programming and the student engagement office because, as I mentioned earlier, I established two organizations myself. And even with that, I think what was very difficult was that although many student organizations tried to have programming events online, they were not very successful because a lot of students were dealing with Zoom fatigue, especially with those of us who were taking on heavier course loads. I was doing 20 credits both semesters in my sophomore year, and to do 5 classes and then to have to go to a social event that isn't mandated for me, I would prefer to kind of reduce my amount of time on the computer as much as I could. However, I think because I started joining more organizations like student government, I was still able to find a group of people who I felt resonated with my experiences and able to create friendships out of that. And now I think in the spring, some clubs got their budgets back, either at a limited degree, I guess you can call it. And we've been kind of trying to do hybrid models while mostly sticking to the remote version of everything, because we had to also be considerate of students who were not able to come back due to the situation. So it's definitely a different experience. I don't think any one of the previous club leaders have ever had to deal with a situation like that, especially all of those who served in the leadership positions on the executive boards. And I know none of my colleagues are here for that, but you know, if I could say like a big thank you to them, I would, because it was truly a lot to take in, managing the budget, making sure you're considerate of all people who are engaging with your organization on a day-to-day basis, making sure that the marketing is on top and that you're being wary of making sure that everybody is able to be informed of what it is that you're doing. So it was a lot going on, but I definitely think we were able to make a lot out of the situation, especially student engagement.
That's great. And it's actually some really good questions in the chat. And Gary, for sure, I think it was a great question to ask. So I might pause on just a second, but I think it's a great question. And Mirko, actually, I had your question, maybe sort of one of my wrap up last one, but we'll for sure get to that. I guess I can ask about athletics, just again, sort of what was life like? What happened with athletics? Tom, you said you're in baseball. Is there anyone else?
Yeah, so when COVID first hit, the baseball team was in season, being that it was in the spring. We were actually just about to start our first conference weekend. We had just gotten back from our Florida spring break trip, and we had a single practice. And then we got the news that athletics were going to be put on hold for a week, as well as classes. And for being honest, at first it was kind of like we thought we were going to be gone for like a week. You know, it was kind of fun. Like guys were like, "Oh, no more classes for a week. Like we get another spring break almost." And then a few days later, they sent us out an email that they had to cancel athletics for the rest of the year. And that was kind of when everybody started to go home. Some athletes chose to stay a little longer. Some immediately went home. And then from there, our coaches actually weren't allowed to have contact with us over the summer. So it was athletics after that point were almost non-existent. There was some good effort by the athletic department to honor the seniors of that year since they had their seasons cut short, such as mostly through social media posts and such like that. But after COVID, athletics were pretty much shut down through the fall of this year.
So very surreal, as I think all of our experience has been since then. Chris asked about, so Brie, you were on campus. What was, and I didn't come to campus more than maybe once in the entire spring last year. What was it like on campus? He asked, what's the dorm like? What did you do? Did you have food? And was it just totally surreal? It wasn't empty, right? You were maybe one of 100 or more students on campus?
Yes, there was I think a little over 100 students on campus, mostly international. Drew was really accommodating for students who weren't able to go home, or who, for me, I worked on campus and still had my job in Madison that I had to go to. So Drew was accommodating so that I wouldn't lose those opportunities. So that was my reasoning for staying on campus. And I want to make sure I answer all of Chris's questions. But the experience overall, I know there was like some of the RAs tried to do some events for us over the summer, and there was an option to have food in the EC, and you got it in a to-go box and you brought it back to your room. And also some students just cooked. We have a kitchen that we had access to if we wanted to cook any of our own food over the summer and have resources to those kinds of things as well. Yeah. Any other questions about that? Did I cover that pretty good?
Karina wanted to chime in on something. I missed your
Yeah,
hand was up.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on the student clubs. One big thing is there's a main, I'm sure it existed before too. It's student activities handled all of the student engagement. I guess you could say they handled all of that transitioning. So first, when COVID hit, it was obviously a huge pause. There wasn't much happening because there wasn't much to do. It was more so transitioning to online and figuring out what other institutions were doing for engagement, because like this is going to answer someone's question about well, Gary's question too, this relates to it. So when they were trying to help with engagement, it was very stressful for students and faculty both, I would say, and generally everyone, because you had to, it depended if you have, like, if you didn't have a place to stay, for example, if you were an international student, some of them did stay at Drew and they were allowed to stay at Drew. Some, like me, like, for example, I live in Jersey. So I packed up like the first part was pack up some things that you needed to, and you would be able to come back in 2 weeks or so, because that was the first stage. Like that was when it was declared a pandemic. And that's like what other institutions did. Then after 2 weeks, they sent out an email saying, okay, now it's time. Like you do have to pack up your whole dorm and everything. So then at that point, I and my other friends had to pack up everything, like come back, and it was scheduled, obviously. So like if, like, for example, my roommate was from New York, so I had to go at an earlier time than her, so I wouldn't like be in contact with her. So they handle that really well. And with student engagement, I would say they did a pretty good job this this past year. Obviously, after learning from the first year when COVID hit initially, the past 2 semesters have been great. They've been doing a really good job with engagement. They did like a virtual escape room. They had like giveaways. They had things for people on campus, especially. So you would go to the cafeteria, like you would go to Commons. Why did I say the cafeteria? You would go to Commons and you would pick up stuff there, social distancing from the table, take it to your room, and you could decorate your cupcake. They had like a paint and sip activity. They had a lot of giveaways. They had a Super Bowl Sunday as well. They had a National Kite Flying Day. they had a lot of events. They were really fun, and they also invited a comedian speaker, Laugh Away. I think it was Leclerc Andre. He was a New York comedian, so it was pretty good. But it was all via Zoom, obviously, and it's really hard. But I think they did a great job balancing that. And obviously, this semester, clubs were able, like the budgets were not frozen this semester. At least, like the budgets were more so like virtual. So they had like packages or giveaways and stuff like that. So for example, like the International Student Association organization on campus, they had a Zoom event, and yes, people were burnt out, but the prizes were really high because the budget essentially doubled up since it was frozen. So they gave away like a lot of, I mean, I'm sure like Gabby, Brie, and Tom can go more in detail with this, at least for CLA, but like they did give out, like Ariel was giving out nice sweatshirts. There were a lot of like cultural prizes. Some people gave out like a flat screen TV, for example, or like AirPods was a popular prize. So that like incited some engagement with the student body. But I can definitely also touch more on the question about the racial justice initiatives, but after the COVID conversation.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important one. 'Cause it's inevitable, and it was I think it's a big part of a campus. And Mirko sort of captured every question I want to ask. But I think Mirko, it's a great question. And as an instructor, I'm really keen to hear about this. Was there anything you might like to see that happened, during COVID, maybe to stick around post COVID? And I'm thinking like, Zoom office hours, or we were able to bring in the psychology department, guest speakers from all over the country or all over the world, really. Is there anything, unexpected delights or things that worked out well, one way or the other, that you wouldn't mind seeing, sticking around after COVID? Or maybe there's nothing, and I'm okay if you say that.
What I really enjoyed, first of all, I really enjoyed being able to just see my advisor during a Zoom meeting, because I felt like it definitely saved so much time from having to walk. My first year, I lived in Welch near the Commons, and my professor's dorm, her office was near Brothers College, and that was like a good like 10 to 15 minute walk on a slow day, 15 minutes. So sometimes I was just tired. So I appreciate just being able to pop my laptop open and see her when I need to speak with her. Another thing that I actually would think would work out in the long run is just to always submit our assignments electronically, because printing services, sometimes it doesn't work, or sometimes we just don't have the exact change to pay for multiple pages to be printed for our assignments. So I think the electronic submissions of multiple assignments not only good for the environment, but also helps the students out significantly as it relates to that task. And I think having those Zoom sessions where we can invite like outside speakers or like people that you're not really local is a good way to continue engaging with the community outside of your local community, if that makes sense. But overall, I'm ready to go back to campus. I'm going back in the fall, and I'm more than excited to be taking all my classes again.
Any other student have a thought about anything?
Yeah, I can chip in. I agree with what Gabby said, as well as I just love the way that alumni have been able to be involved this year as well. Like I did a service project with one of the clubs that I run, where we did a spring into service event, and we talked with alums who have civically engaged careers, and they were coming from all over, and they were able to join all of our events because we did them virtually. And it was really nice to have students online and alum online doing different activities and projects. And going along those lines too, just any kind of guest speakers that we had, like when I did New York semester, we had like Ben and Jerry's come, and there was more different groups of people that we were able to meet with because we were virtual and wouldn't normally have otherwise been able to meet with because they're not based in New York. So there's a lot of opportunities that have sprung up because we are online, and more people can join that way. And so I really liked that about that. And I've been able to attend a lot of webinars, which has been really interesting to help me learn more in my career field. And so I think there's some things that have been beneficial, even though we have been online for a long time now.
A long time, 15 months or so at least. And so Louise, any other student had a thought about any upsides to this that you want to see continue on in the?
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna add a little bit. I can kind of mesh in Louise's question too, so we can hit those both. So I definitely what I saw was I mean, I think there's nothing like this doesn't compare to being in person and kind of interacting with people in person, but you definitely see like this difference in like accessibility and I saw that, especially during my graduate program. I mean, I definitely thought that interaction with my professors was like much more, it just accessible. I don't know what other word to use, but I just felt like I built a connection with my professors because we were kind of, it was kind of like something that we both had to work, like it was new to everybody. So it was almost like, it wasn't just my professor. It was almost like we were all working together to make this thing work, and then kind of even kind of segueing into Louise's question. So I've been obviously applying for a bunch of jobs and having my my interviews online and whatnot. But so I ended up landing a job, which I still don't know to this day if I'm going to be in the office when I start, if I'm going to be remote. And it's definitely interesting meeting the people that you're going to work for virtually when you don't even, I got to see my professor at graduation for the first time ever. I mean, it's just like a totally interesting world that we're living in now, but it's definitely teaching me a lot about, adaptation, you kind of just work with what you got, and then you kind of look back, and then you're grateful for even being able to learn in a classroom, which is like the craziest thing. Like my room's been my classroom for the past year. So, I mean, you take all those things for granted. But yeah, I mean, hopefully I can be in the office. I'm a person that loves that human interaction. So hopefully I can be in the office. I start next month, and I think it's looking like it's gonna be. So
good. I hope so. Others who have done internships, like how did it work? And I'm curious myself, like how did you get them? And was it literally you just never met this person face to face? You just know them through Zoom? It just seems crazy. You feel like you learned a lot? You get stuff out of it?
Yeah, I can speak about this a little bit. So I have to say the interview process has been crazy in that now you can do internships that are based in California or all over the nation. And that is also challenging in itself. I think I applied to so many jobs I can't even, or internships I can't even keep track of, but they're different now. Now when you do an interview, you're not interviewing with a person like we're doing right now. Now they pop a question in front of you, and then they start recording a video of you, and you have to answer that question, which is extremely daunting. And it's not something I can say that I ever have been prepared for, because it's not something I think anyone really saw coming. But I know like the first interview I had is called a Hire View, which is the site that a lot of companies use. They flash a question, they give you 2 minutes to prepare, and then they just start recording you, and then they submit that to the employer, which is really different. And I can say it's just weird, because I really like talking to people and getting to know the person that is interviewing me. And in terms of the actual internships themselves, I was on Slack all the time. I know that that's how they tracked if I was online at my internship, and if I went offline for a moment, they'd be like, "Bree, where are you?" So I think that's like the way they would track kind of how I was working. And then we'd meet once a week or every day just to touch base on the work that we're doing, which is different than what I experienced in prior internships that are in person, where you're constantly, you can pop into their office and be like, "How do you do this?" or how do you do that?" instead of just, trying to type out a question of something that you don't really know or something that you're learning. So it's definitely a different world, and it's definitely very competitive. Like I know one of the internships I applied for that I really wanted was 200 people applied, because it's anyone can apply for it. You're not going against 10 candidates, you're going against a lot more. So it's definitely a lot more challenging. And there was a lot more that went into it in virtual sense, a lot of videos of yourself that you had to record, which is definitely different.
Yeah, it sounds like it's just a complete, but this is, as and I think Nick was saying, it's a different world. And a lot of this stuff, I'm guessing we will see, and those who are in the audience who are, working in employees and employers, your world, I'm sure, has changed too, how you hire and interact with your employees. So I think we all understand some of the challenges as being a student in this period. Were there other, I guess, unforeseen or unseen challenges of doing your academic work while this was going on? I'm thinking about self-care, or you're at home, something you're caring for your parents or younger children, or other things, other challenges that, you know, made you have to make decisions about prioritizing your academics and other things going on in the world?
I know I can definitely touch on that because this was my first semester as president, along with like the entire semester, just like adapting with like federal policies, international students, and then like taking care of myself. I know that the biggest thing was, well, the semester before, I was, as a dance minor, like the dance show was obviously something, like dance is something that's my form of self-care. So having the dance show be online was very, very interesting, but definitely an experience I won't forget. So I'm going to try to answer both of those questions, and also like what Deborah touched on about like learning loss, because I think that definitely was something that impacted my dance minor as well. Um, I do think that well, first with the learning loss, I think that was a big thing because there are things that you do learn. Like I felt like in my classes, my professors were able to still communicate and teach in a manner, but also my majors and minors involved discussion based rather than lecture based. So I think that also played a role, but I think that I was still able to get a good education out of it, especially because it was more accessible now. Like they would share their screen, we would read things together. It was very engaging. They would have people read stuff out loud in class. Obviously, one thing was cameras, not having cameras on in the classroom and not being able to see your classmates, of course, especially if you're in a class and you don't have friends in it. Those are like the small parts of learning that I would say that did hinder like the experience a bit, because you do learn from your classmates as well. But if your classmates' cameras are off and there's like less student engagement, it's obviously not going to be the same as what it would be in a classroom. But I do think I still was able to get like the same education. But like for dance, for example, when we were doing the dance show, that was really stressful because that was the first semester of dance show being online. And I think the first time I did it, we did a presentation, but the second time we did it, we did everything on our own. So because like we couldn't go to campus still, we had to basically film it ourselves on our iPhones or things like that, or the theater and arts department would actually send us our costumes. So they would ship the costumes to us. We would go on Zoom, like a video call with the designers. They would show us what's there. And I would literally have to say, I think I want that one, that one, that one. And then with makeup and things like that, we had to take care. For lights, they actually sent us the lighting equipment ourselves. So I had lighting equipment at my house, but it also depended, like, would you dance inside or outside? So I danced outside. So the lighting directors essentially helped us with lighting, how to like utilize the lighting outside. It was like during the winter time too, on top of that. So it was really complex. But I think like I was still able to get the education I wanted, maybe not develop the relationships that I wanted with my classmates, but I think the professors did a good job, and I'm sure it was hard on them as well, like being engaged with students. And two, I think the learning loss, like obviously I wasn't able to dance with someone or practice like conditioning. That was something that we had to do on our own and make sure to be consistent. Like I couldn't go to the fitness room to work out or do the practices that I needed to. And I'm sure like Brie can definitely relate, being on the dance team. Like it's a lot. You have to do it on your own at home. You have to have the equipment. You have to keep your body conditioned, because by the time you get back to campus, you have to be set like for the fall next semester when we come back. But I think that was something big.
Yeah, that's and things like dance, and maybe I don't know if there's any science. So my wife's in the biology department, so I know some of these hands-on theater art, real challenges of how to get through some of these things that are very hands-on. Other creative solutions you had to do to get through, whether it be dance or laboratory or other things that your students may have experienced?
I can speak a little bit back on both the internships and academic experience. So I did my first 2 internships of my college career remotely. The first one was actually based in Michigan. I was a campaign intern. So like Bree said earlier, like being able to take opportunities from across the entire country was definitely a different experience that we probably would not have been able to learn more about if none of this had happened. However, the second internship I did was a much more formal one, you can call it. It was just 2 interns and I reported to my supervisor very frequently. I was working with paralegals, with pro bono attorneys. I was engaging with the legal system very often. And that meant that my communication skills and the documentation that I was filling out for these paralegals had to be very precise because we were getting involved with the government. So it was very hard for me to really be able to develop the professional relationships with my colleagues due to the remote setting of it all, especially when we were communicating most of the time on Microsoft Teams, which I don't know how many of you have utilized it before, but I personally don't really, I don't really like it. It's not my favorite thing. So using a completely different system, not being able to really learn all the skill sets that I wanted because of the remote setting made it at the end difficult for me to really figure out if law school, because that was the whole purpose, to figure out if law school was really the thing that I wanted to do. At the moment, I don't think it is, but like I said, I feel like if I would have had this experience in person where I could have gone to court hearings in person, could have engaged with more clients, it definitely would have shaped my perspective a little differently. But, you know, at the end, I think with both these opportunities that I had, I was still able to gain a lot more from it than I think I lost. So, you know, it's a living and learning experience. I'm doing my third internship this summer, so that'll be in person. I think it'll definitely help me kind of put together what I want to see that I feel like I've lost within the last 2.5 semesters. And just to touch very briefly on the academic portion of it, I don't think I necessarily got less of an education. However, I do think that after a certain point, we all kind of normalized the idea of remote learning, that not a lot of professors, but some professors, fortunately, I did not have these situations occur, kind of started pulling back on the accommodations that we initially got in the spring of 2020. And that, to me, I personally didn't find fair, because even though we've been remote for a year, most of us have been in the school system in person for at least like 15 years or so. So even though it's been a year, it wasn't an easy transition. Even so, like, we're still getting used to navigating this entire thing, which I definitely appreciate my professors who are considerate of student input and made sure to be weary of what it is that we were going through, because you can't really assume that just because I can come to your 75-minute class and just pop open my laptop and submit something through Moodle very easily is quote unquote as easy as it looks, because there was so much more to grapple with, especially being a student for myself specifically, who stayed at home the entire year on top of, you know, my leadership positions and all those things. But nonetheless, you know, I was still able to enjoy my classes because they were all very much discussion based, and that's probably part of the political science major, at least for me. So that was my experience.
That's great. Gary, I feel like you've had such great questions. So I think Gary's question, the second one, and we're going to get to the George Floyd one. I think that's really important one. But the question is, and I think it's a good one. At any point, did any of you students consider, you know, sort of waiting it out? So, you know, take a leave, dropping out, so to speak, and until we can go back to normal? And I know some students did this. I'm guessing none of you did, and why not, I guess?
I can kind of speak to this one. I personally did not consider dropping out during this past year, mostly because of sports. I wanted to continue playing baseball. If even during the fall, we didn't know if we were going to have a season, but I wanted to continue to stick it out in hopes of having a season, and we end up having a season. However, the thing that I did have to consider was if I wanted to come back to pursue another undergraduate degree or to get a graduate degree, because after the 2020 season, the NCAA issued a blanket year of eligibility to all student athletes. And so every student athlete that we had now has an extra year to play their sport. So that is now a consideration for many athletes going forward.
So you had a good reason to stick around for athletics. And also you just graduated, so you didn't want to drop out with 1 year left to go, presumably. Others, this is your first year, you could imagine. And I taught a lot of first year students that 1920 year. It'd be tough if that were your first year, suddenly you're all sent home. Other responses, other thoughts about anyone consider?
I would actually love to add on to that. I also had an extra year, just like Tom was mentioning, to play another year of soccer, but I chose not to. But I actually saw this whole pandemic as like an opportunity to pursue a further education. So like I mentioned before, I completed my undergraduate kind of when this all started unraveling. And I don't know. And I mean, like we were mentioning before, I mean, obviously the job search is a pain right now. And especially a year ago, it might have even been worse. So yeah, I actually never even considered it. I saw a perfect opportunity to kind of take that extra year, get my master's, and then hope that kind of things normalized a bit to then join the workforce. But and just to touch upon Deborah, I actually didn't feel I had any sort of learning loss. I thought it was actually a pretty cool experience because you kind of saw professors learning as time went on too. And you were kind of like learning with them, you know, we were all adjusting. It's not like it was just the students that had to adjust, but there was definitely rough patches, but I mean, I thought it was a cool experience to kind of, in a way, work with my professors instead of kind of just doing work for them. So, but yeah, no, definitely, I didn't feel any type of learning loss. If anything, I thought it was almost just like little extra addition of learning that you had to add on top of obviously like schoolwork and all that.
And I did want to add to what you mentioned too, because I know like my roommate, for example, she did drop out. She took a year off, but then she decided to drop out but like she and I were very different. She was like pursuing like medicine, but she wanted to do more like first aid training and such, and she lived in Manhattan, New York. So when they said you could go home after like that semester, she dropped out and she decided to focus on volunteering. And then, well, she took a long journey. She did a lot of training, and now she's like a full certified like I don't know what it's called, but she's a fully certified first aid trainer, like in a bunch of things, and at least 5 things, like for heart attacks, a bunch of things. She drives the emergency vehicle. She handles all of that. So she really took advantage. Like she saw this as an opportunity for her to really take a steer on her life, because she felt like it was a lot for her online to take on all of those things. So that was something interesting, like from like that perspective, at least, of a student who did take that journey. And it's been like, I think it's been almost 2 years now, and she reached really far with her training, and she's like succeeding. She's living her best life. She's planning on pursuing schooling again probably, but her volunteer service has really gone far. Whereas like with me, I really, like, similar to Nick, I saw this as an opportunity. But I'm not gonna lie, yes, it did like push me. Like I do want to address that. Yes, like the pandemic, like being online, it was a great opportunity connecting with faculty, but also like self-care was huge, because like everyone said, like I had a 9 a.m. That means like it's just exhausting mentally being on a computer, like right now, being on a computer, especially if you work a 9 to 5. Like I had a 9 to 5 on the weekends, and then I had to wake up and I'm at home. I do cook like breakfast for my family. I take care of my family on top of that. Then I have another job, and then like you're doing extracurriculars. It's like very different. Whereas on campus, like you're alive, and like what, like it's like an alive environment, in the sense you're like surrounded by the forest. You get to see your friends. You get to at least wave, like next to, like you get to wave to someone, say hi to someone. Whereas at home, I'm like in my room, this is my area. And then at the same time, I do have to like tell my family I'm in class right now. You can't just like walk into my class. Like my professor will ask me things, and like, you'll raise your hand, like whatever, the electronic hand, you'll raise your hand, try to talk, but then your family will like burst in through your room. Like that's happened before. That happened, but I think faculty did a good job addressing it. But obviously, like some didn't accommodate, some did. But I think those communications are getting better now, obviously with the pandemic, and people learning that, a lot of the students did have were doing work study, and a lot of students don't have environments where they can turn on their cameras. For me, I had a lot of Wi-Fi problems because I live in a forested area. My professor understood that. So if I would just leave classroom, like I wouldn't leave like intentionally, my Zoom would log me out because of my Wi-Fi. So then I would miss class. So then for that, like they accommodated by recording. I'm trying to answer both questions from last and before, but
Yeah,
I think
but no, I think it shows some of the really unexpected, unforeseen
It does.
challenges that I think you, as a student, you had to deal with on top of the workload and everything else. You know, I know that the time is getting late, and I think, Gary, you asked a really important question about what has the atmosphere been on campus. It wasn't just George Floyd. It was a very active year and busy year with respect to civil unrest. What was it like? Obviously, there weren't a lot of people on campus. How about in your classes? Do you hear things, issues of equity in America, racism? Did your instructors cover this at all? Or what was the spirit on campus? Or what's been your response to that?
I can go into it like just to provide an intro before Gabby goes, but just in general, like if you don't already know, student government did start a collective letter as of June 12th, 2020, after the pandemic, and it does have a list of demands. I can definitely post that or send it to you. I'll put my email in the chat if you'd like the link to that. It's pretty active. Gabby's actually currently the chair of the Race and Racial Justice Committee. Just a short summary. It has a list of demands for academics, student engagement activities, representation, and administrative rules. So we're holding all like 4 sectors accountable, as well as faculty. And there's been discussions about anti-racism training. With regards to protests and rallies, I don't believe there have been protests and rallies on campus. It's more so like social media and really addressing those issues of racism, or writing letters to the university president, for example. And in my classes, obviously as a political science major, it's going to be addressed. I wouldn't say obviously, but it was bound to be addressed. In the dance and Spanish, I think my classes addressed it well, but students are very active and those discussions are happening, and they're very serious discussions. And there's a lot of progress with that, but I'd prefer let Gabby go.
Yeah, in response to Karina mentioning the collective letter, when everything first happened, we were already out of school and majority of people had already left. So nothing, of my knowledge, nothing happened on Drew's campus specifically or within the Madison area. I live in Newark, so I'm not really sure. However, on social media, all the students, I think the vast majority of us were like engaging with what happened, like sharing different news sources and stories about what it was that was happening, and drawing attention and focusing on why this was so important to talk about. And I think that is what led to the buildup of the collective letter, is seeing the mobilization of all of the college students, emphasizing that the administration at Drew needs to acknowledge that this is a pressing issue, not only because we are engaging with, because we have like a Black student population at Drew, but it's also because it doesn't only impact Drew's community locally, it's a nationwide, you can even say global issue about what was going on. So as it relates to the collective letter, multiple students, we were all utilizing the same template, if I remember correctly, and just like copy pasting it and sending it to the president of the university at that time. And we were saying like, you need to acknowledge what happened and you need to like put in like a call to action. And I believe it was the Black Student Union who took the lead on drafting the collective letter to the administration. And I think it's 14 demands. And ever since it was created, the university, particularly student government, has been working to try and meet the needs of them by bridging the gaps as it relates to the communication issues that we have had with faculty, staff, and administration in the past, to create a more diverse, inclusive, equitable, and like more just environment, not just only for Black students, but I think for all BIPOC students at the university itself. I think that was one of the main reasons why in the fall, I decided to start a BIPOC peer mentoring program, because going to a historically white institution, it was very hard for me specifically as a Latina student to no longer go to school with students who look like me or who came from my same backgrounds, who even share like a similar name as me. Like my last name is Ramirez. Like I'm used to being around a lot of Ramirez's around my life, and I didn't have those anymore. So it was just so weird. And I think once all of us started to really engage more with the material outside of the classroom, for me specifically, my political science professors and my sociology professors in the social science departments were willing to make their syllabi more, let me rephrase that. They were willing to incorporate more of these issues in their syllabi. Not all of these professors did. I know maybe for the STEM department, it might look a little different from what I've heard, but I definitely think my professors have catered to what we want to see. I think the only issue for me personally that I wish we probably could have talked about more is if the professors asked us what it was that we wanted to see, not necessarily assuming that the material they were picking was automatically like a quote unquote solution, and was really emphasizing the importance of having these conversations. I hope that answered your question. I know it was like jumping around.
Yeah, no, thank you. That was really useful. Gary, other questions or other thoughts about that? I know, so I'm in the borough of Florham Park, which is just north of Madison. Madison and Florham Park, I think, took a joint Black Lives Matter walk, and it was very well attended, and it was very peaceful, and it was amazingly cleaned up after. I thought it was very well done. I know Madison has had different rallies after sort of various events. The faculty just had two days of kind of training workshops for sort of DEI issues, and with more to come. The psychology department where I'm from, we did, starting, I think, in the fall last year, we have a statement in our syllabus related to these issues. But Gabby, I thank you, because I'm gonna reach out to you because we have this statement, which we sort of pieced together from various sources. We just had this some training this last week where she had some other suggestions for things to put in maybe a syllabus statement, but we'd love to hear more from what you all might like to see in that. So thank you.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing really quickly. So, I mean, as a result of one of the student government meetings, I think Nahek reached out to me actually about it. It happened very quickly, and I could not attend because I had another event starting maybe half an hour after it started. But I reached out to a couple of alums who joined the meeting, and as a result of that, the Black Alumni Association really developed and formed and grew, and has been working also with the Black Student Union, you know, to kind of focus on that. Yeah, and the staff also have had training around valuing diversity, and there will be more of that as well coming.
And also, I just wanted to add to, like, one important thing you definitely should be aware of is there's a new organization on campus called Drew Roosevelt Network. It is very big, and it's like growing extremely fast. It's basically a public policy based organization. So they're kind of revolutionizing a lot of the conversations happening on campus socially, and definitely like obviously the political conversations, but they have hosted conversations with Madison and the Black Lives Matter Morristown, I believe, and they've held 2 workshops, and they've also been organized by organized by students of the Drew Roosevelt Network. If anyone's interested, I can definitely connect you with those 2 student leaders. But administration has actually attended those workshops, and those workshops were discussions about the history of policing, defunding the police. They invited the speaker. He's a famous author. His name is Alex Vital. They've also organized a lot of conversations about abolition, as well as state and local politics and things like that. So these are really important discussions that are happening at Drew as well, and administration are attending them, and staff and faculty. So I think that's also really important for you all to know, as that initiated as a student conversation, but it's reaching out definitely across the Drew community. And also to add on, the CLA, like at least CLA student government, has worked with the Theo School for the AAPI hate, addressing AAPI hate in the US. And we've been organizing conversations with faculty about faculty who study in those specific subjects, about having those conversations with students. So there's definitely a lot of engagement conversations around, but there's still a lot of progress that needs to be done.
Great. Thank you, Karina. And if you haven't seen, there are some links in the chat that Karina posted if you're interested in this collective letter and some other things going on. How about I pose one sort of final thought or question? This was actually Mirko's question from the very beginning, and one I thought we might try to, like, what are your hopes for the fall? Like, what are you looking forward to? What do you hope to see different? Did that capture your question, Mirko? I'm going way back to the beginning here. Yeah, what are you most looking forward to, I guess? What are you most looking forward to next semester when maybe things are somewhat back to normal? You can just sort of go around the room, each of you.
I can start. Obviously, I'm not going back in the fall, being that I just graduated and looking for a job. But my current roommate and best friend will be attending graduate school there and playing baseball using his extra year of eligibility. And so this is something we've actually talked about a lot. And most of our hopes center around restrictions around athletics being lifted, being able to have a fall season, and for baseball and other sports, and then being able to be around our teams more often and have more team events is something that we're really looking forward to. And just being able to have some sense of normalcy will be very welcome for the people that will be returning.
For me personally, I'm going to be a junior, and I think one of the things in the classroom I want to see my professors. Like, I've had my favorite professor that I've had to date, I've only had online, and I'm very excited to finally meet him in person, because I will be his DSEM writing fellow, which is super cool, because rather than seeing him twice a week remotely, I'll probably be working with him like 3 to 4 times a week in person for like a long time. So that's all super exciting. And I also really want to get back to like mingling with my friends in the commons and the EC, like walking to class together, doing homework together in the library. I know this sounds much more minuscule than like the larger picture, but honestly, I feel like the socialization process of being a college student is at the core of the college experience. And I would really like to get that back. And to tie back to what Gary had mentioned in the chat earlier, I definitely want to see the activism that we saw within the last year continue, and hopefully, help us reach those goals that we want to see, or at least get closer to reaching those goals. Because I know that it was, quote unquote, like easier for people to attend these like different Zoom events because we were online. However, I would like to see administration, staff, faculty, students, everybody in the community like continue to be just as engaged, even though we'll probably be going back to an almost in-person setting. So those are my hopes, and I'm quite excited for it.
I think for me, one thing, I'm originally from Vermont, so I knew nothing about New Jersey when I got here. And so one of the things I loved most about Drew is how much it became like a home. Within a couple of weeks, when you walk on the path, everyone waves to you, even if you don't remember their name, it's still a friendly face. And something that's crazy to me is I'm going to be a senior, and I don't know anyone below me that well because of COVID. And I really want to get to know the classes that are years younger, because I know when I was a freshman, I knew people that were graduating. I knew a lot of people that graduated this year just because of the community that Drew has established. And I really want to get to know the juniors, sophomores, and freshman class when they come, because it's something that makes Drew so unique, is that, everyone knows everyone, and that's what I love about Drew. So I really am excited to get back to meeting people, seeing people at clubs, and walking on the path and saying hi to people, seeing the squirrels,
Yeah, the social aspect is what's really been missing, I think. Are there final thoughts on this?
I think I'm most looking forward to just actually seeing humans rather than on a screen. I would say I've been on too many Zoom calls, as much as everyone else probably. You all definitely understand with work. And I'm also just excited to be on campus in the forest. Because I live in a forested area, but it's definitely not the same. I think there's a lot of history behind the land that Drew's on. And I think it's just really exciting to engage with people in general. You can't really read people's body language. Like right now I'm communicating with you all, but I feel like I am not able to build that bond or relationship that I would be able to. Like, for example, when you're interviewing, I'm not able to build that over here on Zoom. So I think I'm just excited in general. It's a new step, and I'm sure you all are excited too, but I do have to be cautious definitely about, rushing into things, because I'm doing the UN semester with Gabby. We're both doing the UN semester. They're doing it right now, we're doing it in New York, but it's not set, obviously, if Governor Murphy changes policies and his guidelines. But I'm excited, and it's a new adventure, and it's something that we all have to adapt to. So.
Great. Well, thank you. And thank you all. A little round of applause for our students. I really do appreciate it. What a long, strange trip it's been, for sure. Yes, someone's going to say something? No, Carol's just laughing.
No, that's a Grateful Dead song.
That's a Dead quote, which I knew you would know that.
There you go.
I think we'll wrap it up there, but I really do appreciate both the students and the alumni and friends and family for being here. There are some links in the chat and some emails in the chat if you want to catch up with any of these students or reach out to Carol or me. I'm P. Dolan at Drew. I'm not going anywhere. And have a great evening and hope to see you all soon in the forest for real. Take good care. Have a good night now.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Night now.